Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pop the hood on the Mughal Empire to see how one of history's most effective leaders, Akbar, built an operating system for governing that was, frankly, centuries ahead of its time.
So let's dive in. First, we'll get inside the emperor's head and understand his philosophy. Then we'll meet his core team, the real engine room of the empire. After that, we are going to break down the absolutely genius system he used to organize all his nobles, figure out how on earth he paid for it all, and finally see how this entire model was scaled up to run a massive empire.
Okay, so to really get what Akbar was building, you have to understand why he was building it. And this quote from his official historian, Abu Fazl, is the key. It basically frames the emperor as the one thing standing between civilization and total chaos. It's this idea that without a strong, central ruler, society just falls apart.
Right. So how do you take that big idea and turn it into a philosophy for ruling? Well, for Akbar, it all started with ideology, not bureaucracy. His right to rule, he believed, wasn't just won on the battlefield. No, it came from somewhere much, much higher. So the core idea, and this is super important, is something called Far-e-Zadi, the divine light. Now, this is way more nuanced than the European divine right of kings. It wasn't just that God picked him, it was the belief that the emperor was a direct channel for God's wisdom and light, making him a spiritual guide for all his people, not just Muslims. This put him above all the political and religious arguments of the day.
So you might think this divine light thing is just a blank check for absolute power, right? But for Akbar, it was the exact opposite. It was a massive responsibility, a sacred duty. The emperor was supposed to be a father to his people, and his main job was to protect everyone, especially the weak, and make sure there was justice and peace for all. This ideal was the moral justification for the whole administrative machine we're about to explore.
Okay, a grand vision is one thing, but how do you actually make it happen day to day? Well, you need a solid team. So let's meet the key players in the empire's central engine room.
All right, check this out. What Akbar built was a brilliant system of checks and balances. You have the Diwan. Think of him as the CFO, holding all the money. Then there's the Mir Bakshi, an absolute powerhouse. He's like the Secretary of Defense and the head of HR all rolled into one. The Mir Saman was the COO, running the whole imperial operation, and the Sadr handled all the religious and charitable stuff. The key thing here is that their powers were deliberately kept separate.
And this whole design wasn't just some abstract theory. Nope, this was a lesson learned the hard way. Early in his reign, Akbar had this regent, Bahram Khan, who got way too powerful because he controlled both the army and the money. After Akbar finally managed to push him out, he swore he would never let one person get that much power again. It was a brilliant move to make sure everyone's loyalty was to him and not to some other powerful official.
Okay, so you've got your ideology, you've got your top ministers, but now for the really big question. How do you control thousands of ambitious nobles, commanders, and officials from all different backgrounds, spread all across a subcontinent? Akbar's solution was an absolute stroke of administrative genius, the Mansabdari system. So around 1573, Akbar rolls out what is basically the steel frame of his entire empire. It was one unified ranking system for everybody, from a top general right down to a junior guy at court. Suddenly, this whole mix of different nobles all fit into one coherent structure. Your mansab, or rank, was everything. It told everyone your status, your salary, and how much clout you had.
And the genius of the system boiled down to two simple numbers, Zat and Sawar. Think of it like this. Zat was your personal rank. It decided your salary and your spot in the pecking order. Sawar, on the other hand, was your military obligation. It was the number of fully equipped cavalrymen you had to bring to the fight for the imperial army. It was a brilliant way to tie personal status directly to service to the empire.
And what this did was create this super clear career path, like a ladder you could climb. You started out as a basic mansabdar. If you did well, you could get promoted to an emir or noble. And if you were a total rock star, you could reach the top tier, the emiri umda, the great nobles. It was this perfectly structured system of ambition that kept everyone focused and loyal. Now, a few key rules made this whole thing incredibly effective. First, and this is a big one, your rank wasn't hereditary. You couldn't just pass it down to your son. This stopped a powerful, independent aristocracy from ever forming. Second, you got paid in either cold hard cash or with the jagir, which was the right to collect taxes from a piece of land. And here's the really clever part. These jagirs were constantly rotated. They moved you around all the time so you could never get too comfortable and build your own little kingdom. Everyone's focus stayed right where it belonged, on the emperor.
Okay, a system with thousands of officials on the payroll, a massive army, that's got to be crazy expensive, right? So where did all the money come from to fuel this massive imperial machine? Well, the answer lies in some seriously forward-thinking ideas about collecting revenue.
The answer was a system called zapti, and honestly, for its time, it was revolutionary. This was a totally data-driven approach to taxes. Masterminded by his brilliant finance minister, Todar Mal, it got rid of all the old, arbitrary tax collection. Instead, the state went out, carefully measured the land, tracked crop yields and prices for the last 10 years, and then set a fixed, predictable tax rate of 1/3 of the average produce.
This was a total game changer. For the state, it meant a stable, predictable income stream. For the farmers, it meant no more guessing games or getting shaken down by tax collectors. You knew exactly what you owed. The system even had a heart. It was flexible. If you had a bad harvest, you could get tax relief. The state even gave out loans to help farmers. It was a system built for stability and growth. All right, so we've seen this incredibly sophisticated system at the center. But how do you make that work across a massive, sprawling, and diverse empire?
Well, the genius here was actually pretty simple. They just copied and pasted. Each province, or suba, was set up to be a perfect, miniature version of the central government in the capital. This cookie-cutter approach was the secret to keeping control over such a vast area.
And you can see here just how perfectly it mirrored the center. The emperor has his governor in the province. Each of the big central ministers, the Diwan, the Mirbakshi, the Sadra, they all had a direct counterpart in the province. And this created this brilliant dual reporting structure. The provincial officials had to answer to the governor, sure, but they also had to answer to their bosses back in the capital. Talk about checks and balances. And this structure just kept branching down like a tree. The provinces, or subas, were split into districts, the districts into smaller units called parganas, and so on, all the way down to the individual villages. It created this unbroken chain of command right from the emperor's throne down to the smallest village headman, tying the whole empire together. So, what's the big takeaway here? What can a 500-year-old system teach us about how to run a country today? Well, it shows us that the core ideas of good government are pretty timeless, aren't they? Things like a clear vision of public good, a system to stop any one person from getting too powerful, a professional civil service based on merit, and a tax system that's actually predictable and fair. Akbar's administration isn't just some dusty old thing from a history book. It's a masterclass in how to build a state, and its lessons, wow, they still ring true today.